For one night and one night only, local book girl will be attempting her own version of the Bird Box Challenge. No, I will not be going into any casinos blindfolded or doing dumb shit like that, like Love You Morgan Adams, but like not doing that. But what I will be doing is fucking squinting the whole time because I just got contacts and I can't see shit. So I'm on the same level as all the Bird Box characters, which is fitting since that is what I'm reviewing today. So yeah, I can't see because I have contacts in and I don't wear contacts, so do what you will with that information if this video looks weird with my eyes squinting or whatever. Also, ideally, I would be filming this in front of my bookshelf, but currently there's a cat sleeping in that corner where the window is, and I'm not trying to disturb them because that's a felony. Like, disturbing a sleeping cat is a felony, and I'm not going to prison, so it's fine. So yeah, also if you hear weird noises, it's probably just the cat in the background, like, being an idiot. So yeah, most of this review will probably be like comparing the book to the movie because that's like the frame of reference I have, and I think the frame of reference like a lot of people have, because I don't know if it was just me and if I'm just like dumb, but I didn't even realize that it was a book. Like, I saw the movie and I wasn't like, I had no knowledge of it being a book until I saw the physical book in a bookstore, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's just me. Like I said, maybe a bunch of people knew it was like based off of a book, but because like the movie's more popular and that's what I saw first, it's gonna be like comparing that. Okay, so I'm editing this video right now and I realized that I forgot to explain what the book slash movie is even about because I'm a dumb bitch and it's like the first book review I filmed, and I guess a part of me was like, everyone's seen the movie or like heard about it, so I forgot to explain. So just quick rundown. It's a book that's set in like our world as we know it, but over time these news reports start trickling in of people being like exceptionally violent towards themselves or to others. So yeah, need to put in a quick trigger warning for all of this, like even what the book is about, and for all of the review. It talks a lot about like suicide and violence towards other people, so if those subjects like bother you, then it's probably not a good idea to like read this book or watch this review or anything like that. But these people are all across the world, reports are coming in of people being violent towards others and towards themselves and committing suicide, and you realize over time that like it's because of the things that these people are seeing. There's creatures that have come to our planet, and when you see them, it causes you to basically just like lose your mind, and either you'll kill yourself, or if you already have like some other mental problems, at least in the movie that's how it's interpreted, that like you will start acting violent towards other people, trying to get them to see the creatures. And it's about a group of survivors who's just trying to like exist in this new changing world. And it's like two different stories, not two different stories, but two different times at once. Like, you're hearing about what happened in the past and what's happening in the present for these characters, and just like finding out how they're surviving in this world. Probably do like general overview first and then go into like spoilers. So for the non-spoilery section, I would really recommend the book, especially if you watched the movie and liked it. Even if you didn't, it's just a really good like sci-fi like dystopian book, and I know like we're all kind of over our dystopian like apocalyptic phases, but like it's pretty good. It's pretty good, especially if you want a book that like really gets you thinking or really is like tense and you just want to know what happens, and like you want a good story that's gonna keep you entertained. Bird Box was really good for that. The entire time I was like on the edge of my seat, like waiting desperately to see what would happen next, which is why I read it in one night, because I just like had to finish it and I had to know what happened, even though I already knew what happened in the movie. So, and even if you have watched the movie, there are minor details that are different, and even though you know like what the ending is gonna be, it's still really interesting to see how it gets there and like the differences that it takes and the different paths it takes. And I think it's a really good read for like anybody. If you're like really afraid of horror or like monsters and stuff like that, then maybe it's not for you. But I'm a little bitch and I don't watch horror movies because they terrify the shit out of me, and I could still handle this. I could also handle the movie, so I figured I'd be okay reading the book. But if you're like really easily scared or like made uncomfortable by like creatures and monsters, then yeah, maybe not for you. I think I'd give it like 5 out of 5 stars. It was really good and I genuinely enjoyed it. And it's nice too to read like a book that was just like one standalone book, because I feel like so many YA books now, it's like, read this entire trilogy, and it's like sometimes you just want like a short, nice little like standalone book that like holds your attention, and like the story is nicely wrapped up in one book, and you don't have to like keep following the characters and like dealing with cliffhangers and stuff. And the ending genuinely was satisfying. Like, so often to me book endings are just like kind of annoying, and like I'm left wanting more, but I didn't feel that with this book. So moving into like more spoilery stuff, like if you haven't read it yet, or you haven't watched the movie and you have any interest in that, like click away now, come back when you've read it or watched it, or don't. If it's not your cup of tea, like that's okay. I'm not gonna hunt you down. Probably. Anyway, I'm probably gonna be checking my notes in like my notebook just to make sure I get everything. I'm gonna go over some of like the major differences first, and that is just that like in the movie everything was so much easier. Like it wasn't nearly as tense versus like the book. I was just like, oh my god, like this is so like nightmarish. Especially like getting supplies. Like in the movie they just go into the garage, paint the car's windows, and then use the GPS to just drive to the store and get supplies. I'm like, yeah, someone dies while they're at the grocery store, but they still make it back okay with their supplies, versus like in the book they have to go through this whole thing of like finding dogs that will alert them to the creatures, and then also at one point they do, I think Mallory needs to go get supplies on her own, but the car is out in the street and she has to go out and try to like cover it, still blindfolded in the street, and then it doesn't have GPS. She just has to use a map to like try to figure out how to get there herself, and it's a lot more tense and a lot more difficult. And then we also find out that like the dog warning system doesn't work anyway, and the animals aren't immune and they go crazy too, and like that was really tense because up until that point we thought it was only humans and we thought the dogs were safe. But the whole dog thing kind of confused me anyway, because like, yeah, they're an early warning system just like the birds, but it's more mouths to feed because you have to feed the dogs. So even if you go and get more supplies with their help, you still just have to like feed them, and that seems like a lot more work than like the actual help from the dogs will be. And even in terms of getting supplies, it was more difficult too, because Tom, I think his name was, like they walked multiple miles to go get supplies from his house just with the dogs, and like didn't come back for days, and like it was a lot more tense and it was just a lot more difficult, which makes sense because it's like the book and they can put more detail in, versus the movie is just trying to like wrap everything up in a neat package in like an hour plus like 30 minutes instead of an entire book that has like lots of room for extra detail. The actual river journey itself too was a lot more tense. Like, yeah, it was really tense in the movie, but really the only obstacle they faced was like that other crazy man on the boat, which does happen here, but it's weird in the book that that's almost less tense, because like in the movie, if I remember correctly, he like tries to attack them, versus in the book he just like leaves. He's just like, okay, it's fine, I'll let you alone now. But for the most part, the river journey in the movie, like compared to the book, was like a lot less tense, because at the end then they face the obstacle of like the kids almost getting like manipulated by the voices, and she like saves them and gets them to the school or whatever. But in the book there was so much more, and I was just like, holy shit. Like, I mean, there's the fact that like they get attacked by wolves, like one of the wolves literally just like claws Mallory's shoulder, so she's dealing with that, and she literally passes out from like blood loss and from pain, and she's just like passed out, and these like small children are just like rowing the boat, just like continuing to go on this journey, and like it's normal, it's totally normal. It didn't make me like stressed to hell at all, but that like was really tense because the animals, like I feel like them going insane is almost scarier than the people, because the insane people, you can reason with them to some degree. The people who aren't mentally ill and just go insane and kill themselves, like obviously there's no reasoning with that, it's just taken over their minds. But the ones who are mentally ill and are still kind of there and just acting like unhinged, you can reason with them to some degree. Like Mallory gets that man in the boat to just leave them alone, and that's like less scary to me than just wild animals that aren't afraid of humans anymore, because like everyone's scared of like wolves and bears and things like that. But in our current reality, in the world that we live in, those animals are more scared of us than we are of them. But if you change that into a world where these animals have no basic fear anymore, they have none of their basic instincts other than just to kill and to hunt and to like be wild because of like what's going on in their brains, that's really scary. At least to me, as someone who like loves animals, like the idea of them being like affected by this too and just acting like not how animals act anymore, like that's kind of scary. And that was like really tense in the book too. And then yeah, even going along with the animals, the birds above the boat start killing each other. Like they're just all attacking each other and like murdering each other because like that's all that they know because of what the creatures have done to them, and they start just raining down on Mallory and the kids. And that's so scary. Like birds are already kind of freaky. Like, sorry, love ravens, but like they're terrifying. Like the thought of like owls and shit like that just attacking each other for no reason and just like going at it, like I hate that. I hate that. Like makes me so uncomfortable. The idea of that, like oof. And even those are the only like animals we see apart from Victor the dog, and it's like I love horses, but can you imagine just like horses like running people down and trying to kill them just because like they're going insane? Like that's terrifying. That's genuinely terrifying. Like the implication that all of these animals can go insane if they see the creatures. Like, can you think about, like, can you conceptualize that? Like, if someone's on a boat in the ocean and like great white sharks just start trying to fucking attack the boat because they saw the creatures, or whales, like a blue whale just like tries to capsize your boat because like it saw a creature and it went insane, like that's terrifying. Like the idea of nature itself turning on like the basic principles that it exists like in now makes me so uncomfortable to think about. Like oof. And that's like I've been saying, the book like makes me think about so much more stuff than the movie did, because the movie it's just like you're just along for the ride, you're just watching it. Like I watched it with a group of friends for the first time where we were like all joking about it, so I wasn't really thinking about this stuff, but reading the book has like opened up so many questions for me. And even apart from just like nature itself hurting them on the boat, there was also like Mallory had to physically contend with a creature who was trying to take off her blindfold. Like I can't even imagine the fear that you would feel when you know that seeing this world means losing your mind, like losing your sanity, and you feel a creature pulling the blindfold off of your eyes. And she is so incredibly strong to be able to tell the creature like no, and to put the blindfold back and to just leave when that creature is stopping the boat and trying to get her to look and trying to convince her it's okay to look and like trying to force her to see. And she's so close to her goal and she has to like face this final battle, and it's not even something physical. She's been fighting like physical things this whole journey, but that is mental. That is all in your brain. You have to be strong enough to fight that creature, to be like, no, I am going to win. You will not take my sanity. You will not hurt my children. You are not going to remove my blindfold. That is all mental, and that is like so incredible to me that she was able to do that, and also so fucking terrifying. Like I can't, like I said, I can't imagine the fear. And I knew that there was a happy ending from watching the movie, but like at that part I was just so tense, especially because the two storylines, the past and the present, were like getting tense at the same time, and I knew how it ended, but I was just like, how is she gonna defeat this creature that's just like clearly from what we've read is just like all evil? I mean, I guess that's a question in and of itself. Like, are these creatures inherently evil, or it's like, are they inherently evil or not? Because if this is how they exist and how they function, is that evil in and of itself? And that's hard to deal with, but it's like, from our point of view, they're evil, and she has to defeat this evil, and like, how is she gonna do it? It's so stressful thinking about like, okay, I know there's a happy ending, but how is it gonna happen? Like, ugh. God. And yeah, with both storylines getting tense at the same time, like I said, you're focused on like, okay, how is she gonna like survive this boat journey and get to the final place where she needs to be, and what is gonna happen in the house as it's going on, because you can tell that like Gary, yeah, you're like watching all that and you know that Gary's like not right and he's suspicious, and you can feel it like in your bones that like something is not right there, but you're just waiting for what it's gonna be. And at that point, like at the same point as she was dealing with the creature, I think it was right along when they had kicked Gary out and he had like gotten back into the house, and like you know it's all going crazy and you know that like it's not gonna end well, but you don't know how it's gonna happen. And like Mallory and Olympia are both giving birth while like the rest of the house is like screaming and dying, because like Gary had come in and removed all of the covers on the window, and at this point like they're all dead. And I can't again like imagine the fear and the terror of like giving birth yourself with no modern medicine. There's no one there to help you except for a psychopath who's trying to hurt you and your babies, and like you have to give birth yourself. You have to cut your own umbilical cord. Really? Really? With the noise from the street? Okay. Yeah, you just have to do it all yourself with no one there to help you. Also, while you're terrified of the psychopath and like what he's gonna do, who's just standing in the corner watching you, not letting anyone up into the attic, and like it's horrifying to think about. And like thank God Mallory managed to get girl from Olympia and like managed to get that child, and that way like Olympia couldn't hurt her too. But then even once Gary was gone, like the strength it must have taken for her to go back out into that house blindfolded and check everything and cover everything and like find all the dead bodies of the people she cared about. And that was like another difference between the movie and the book, was that in the book she had some help with the kids because Tom lived. I'm pretty sure it was Tom, yeah. They both escaped. They went to a different house. They both lived, and he helped her for a while with the babies, but she was alone. Everyone in this world she cared about was dead. Everyone from before it had happened was dead, and all the people she knew now that had become her family, they were dead too. And she's taking care of 2 children on her own in this house where all these people that she cared about just died. Like, the strength that must have taken is unbelievable. And even in the book too, all of the characters had such a larger role. Like they were all important. We were attached, or at least I was attached to all of them, and it was really sad to see them all die because they had such a large role, because they were there right up until almost the end of the book, versus in the movie they were really only there for part of it, and like most of it was what was going on the river and like the boat, and a lot of the people in the house like died very early on. Although I did just find out in an interview from Machine Gun Kelly that apparently all the people in the house filmed like much larger portions, and like the house and all the people living in it, like Felix and everyone, were going to have much larger roles, but then in like the final cut they just made it much shorter and like made it more focused on Mallory and the kids on the river. So it seems like originally they were going to make it more like the book where like everyone had a big role, but then they just like changed their minds, which it's a movie. Book to movie adaptations are pretty much always disappointing because they change a lot. So yeah, because all of those characters were more important, it raised the stakes too, as like the situation was getting more tense. It's like you wanted the other people to live and you were worried about them, while you were also worried about Mallory in both situations. Like you're worried about Mallory and the kids on the river in the present, and you're worried about Mallory in the past dealing with her entire world falling apart while she's giving birth, while this psychopath is like in their house and their safe haven. And it was a lot more like impactful than the movie, because in the movie I wasn't really attached to any of those other characters, any of those other people living in the house with her, because we just didn't have enough time to get to know them. So when they died, it was just like, okay, yeah, that sucks, but like I'm not attached to them. And it made it a lot more tense as you get to the end, and it's like, even knowing that there was a happy ending, I was just like on the edge of my seat, like I need to finish this book now because I need to know what happens. Like I need to read those last 60 pages because like I know they're gonna die, but I don't want them to. And like it was so tense. It was so tense. Because I watched the actual movie first, I'm not like necessarily disappointed with like the adaptation, because like whenever you watch a movie first and read the book second, like what you know about the book is based on the movie first. So like it's not as disappointing. Like, I saw the Mortal Instruments movie with Lily Collins before I ever read any of the Shadowhunter books. So while that movie is like objectively like really kind of bad, I loved it because I saw it before I read the books, and that's kind of what happened here. Like, I love the book too, but the movie doesn't piss me off as much as other book to movie adaptations because like I saw it first. It's like what I think of when I think of Bird Box. And for someone who's looking for like a horror movie that has a happy ending that like isn't really gonna make them think all that much, but is still gonna be like good and like impactful in a way, I think the movie's good. But the book made me think so much more. Like, I was having like all these existential questions and like questioning like, what would I do in this situation? Or what in general would like the whole world do in this situation? Like, right at the beginning, there's all these reports of like these incidents happening, and Mallory doubts them and she thinks it's just like a hoax or something. And in the internet generation that we live in, if something like this were to happen, would people think it was really happening, or would they think it's just some kind of like art prank or some kind of like hoax that like a YouTuber was doing to like make a social comment? Like, would we accept that that is reality and that is what is happening in our world, or would we and would we want to accept it as reality, or would we want to just label it as a hoax and performance art because that is easier than accepting it at base value, especially in like the time that we're living in right now with like fake news and people just not wanting to believe what they hear from the news stations. Like, as someone who's going to college for journalism, like, I think it's really important to like get the news out to the public, but right now there's so much general distrust in the news and news stations and journalists, and it's like, would the public want to believe this, or would they think it's like something made up by like some group to promote a certain like subliminal message or to promote a political agenda? Because that is the world that we're living in right now, where people think that everything has to be some kind of like proponent for a message, and not everything does. Like, things like, if this were to happen, if like this book became a reality, I think people would have so much like a hard time accepting that it was actually going on, because everyone would just want to label it that like, oh, the other political party is like trying to do this to make us like think a certain way or something, or they just think it's like really good like internet hoaxes, because sometimes like genuinely stuff that is fake and made up does get on the news, even if it's not for a political agenda. It's just that rumors spread so fast now on the internet without the ability to really fact check them or like stop them from spreading. And even like, it's so easy to perpetuate myths, like the whole thing that a person swallows 8 spiders on average a night. Someone made that fact up to show how fast misinformation spreads. It's a fake fucking fact that we all accept as truth, even though someone made it up for the purpose of showing how fast misinformation spreads. So all these people out here now like prepare and prep for like doomsday and for the apocalypse. But if it even happened, would we accept that it was happening? Or would we just continue to live our comfortable lives and act like it would never affect us, or like it isn't even happening? Which is like horrifying to think about, because like, I know if I saw this online, I probably would just be like, oh, okay, these reports started in Russia, like it's Russia that just happens there, like just like Mallory did. And it would take me a long time to accept that like this was happening, especially because in the book it happens over a course of like weeks and months, where like the incidents spread across the world and they start in the US, but in the movie it's just instantaneous. It's just instantaneous doomsday, and like you have no choice but to leave it, because all across the world at the same moment people are committing suicide based on things they saw, and it crumbles like that, like immediately, instantly. Versus in the book, it's such a long spread out time, and like I feel like that would be so much more difficult to accept, because even though you see it happening, it's so spread out and it happens so slowly that you would have to believe that like somehow the government or the CDC or whatever would find a way to fix it. So I think people would take it like so much less seriously, because it took so long that like people would just think it won't affect me, versus when it's instantaneous, like you have no choice but to believe like this is happening, this is what's going on. And even like we see that now, like we get warnings about like climate change. We have reports from the UN saying that by 2050 we'll be facing a mass extinction event unless we like dramatically change the things we're doing. But because it's happening slowly over time, we're unwilling to accept it or to change. But if like we were having like horrible effects of climate change like overnight, like if part of California just broke off and like we saw big things like that just happening overnight, people might be more willing to like see that it was happening and changing. And yeah, that tangent just got weird, but sorry, it's like the journalist like political side in me. I'm like going into it because like this is the shit that I think about. And yeah, that's like what I said, this book made me think a lot more than like the movie did, even about like just like morality and shit like that. Because like, would you want to live in this world? And that's something I've always said, like in an apocalyptic situation, why would you want to survive? Like everyone preps and like plans and thinks about what they would do. And like I watched The Walking Dead for a period of like years. There's a fucking Daryl Dixon blanket right across from me right now because of how long I watched it. And like, yeah, I thought about it too. I was like, what would I do in this situation? But like, realistically, why would you want to survive? Like in most apocalyptic situations, the world is never going to repair itself. And you're just, there's a difference between surviving and living. And I'm like, why is it worth it to survive when there's no like end point? There's probably no end to this. And I don't know, I've always just thought that like depending on what the apocalyptic situation is, like in most of them, I would probably just end it. And that's like morbid as hell, but like if there's no end in sight, if there's no cure in sight, if there's no like rebuilding of society in sight, why do you want to live? I don't know. And that's like what this book was making me think a lot about, because they're struggling so hard to like fight to survive, but for what goal? And yes, eventually they do make it somewhere safe, but how long can that last? Like reading apocalyptic stuff, like books or watching those TV shows has shown me that like safe places can only last for so long, at least in that type of society. Maybe in real life, like humans would actually work together and those places would stay safe for longer. But is that a guarantee? And even like part of Mallory and Olympia having these kids was I forget who suggested it, but someone suggested that they just blind the children as soon as they're born so that they never know. And honestly, it sounds cruel, but it's probably better than the other way around. Because for people who have had sight for their whole life, changing to a world where you can't see anything would be so difficult. Adapting to any type of apocalyptic scenario when you have known what happened before would be so difficult, versus these kids, it's all they've known. And if they've been blinded from the day they were born, then really it's all that they've known, and they can't miss what happened before. They can't long for it because they didn't experience it. And it might be more kind to them to do that rather than let them struggle to accept the idea that like they can see, but if they go outside and they take off their blindfolds, like they'll die. And even though it is the world that they live in, it just, I don't know, it's so difficult. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what I would do in that situation. It's like insane to think about. And I like made a note about it, but it really reminds me of Room, the Brie Larson movie, because like she convinces her son that the only world that exists is in that room, and like doesn't tell him anything else about what goes on in the outside world, versus Mallory tries to tell them what's going on in the outside world and just tells them that like they can't experience it anymore. And it's like, which is crueler? Because in Room, where he gets outside, it seems like, why would she tell him that? Like, why would she lie to him? But is that more kind than him knowing that there's an entire world out there that he will never get to experience? And it's like, would it be more kind for Mallory to lie to the children and have just blinded them and never let them know what's going on in the outside world? Or is it like kinder to them, to let them know in the hopes that one day they'll experience it. And it's like, I'm not a mother, I will never be a mother, but I like can't imagine what it would be like to be a mother in that situation, like trying to make those decisions that will impact your children for the rest of their life and the way they see the world for the rest of their life, however long that may be, depending on if it's like an apocalyptic situation. And it's just like crazy to think about. And all the things that they do in like to protect themselves and their children, it makes me think about the show The 100 a lot, because a running theme there is like, then we get our humanity back. First we survive, then we get our humanity back. And it's like, but is that actually worth it? Like, is it worth it to do like horrible things knowing that you will survive because of the horrible things you do, and then trying to like make up for it and get your humanity back like once you have a chance to do so? Because like, if you're in an apocalyptic situation like this, will you ever get a chance to get your humanity back? Or if this just keeps going on forever, do you just keep doing more horrible things that don't justify the end? Because there is no end. There is no chance to ever justify the means, because you will never get the chance to live a happy life, or you can't hurt other people, because in this type of situation, it really comes down to survival of the fittest, and who can you trust, and you need to put yourself and your children first. But that goes against human instinct, because naturally we like to band together, we like to trust other people, we like to form societies, but in this situation, you can't trust anybody, because I shouldn't call them crazy, that's not the right word, but just the mentally ill people who are affected in a different way by this, clearly they can act sane. Like, Gary was suspicious, but he acted like mostly normal. So human instinct is to want to band together and trust people, but you even can't in this situation. And it's just, this rant has been like so incoherent, but this book really made me think like so much and like ask myself so many questions, and it's just like insane. And I didn't think that was gonna happen from just like a sci-fi like apocalyptic novel that I like first saw on Netflix, but it did. Although I do have to add in that while like the book made me have more existential questions, the movie was a bit scarier with the fact that the creatures aren't like physical. I know that they like leaked the information that like there was supposed to be a physical creature that Sandra Bullock faces, but she just couldn't stop laughing because it was like so funny looking or whatever, so they didn't put it in. But the movie makes it seem like there's just something in the air and it's not physical, like you can't touch it, you can't really like see it. Like if you see it and you go insane, you can see it, but otherwise like everything looks fine. I don't know. Versus in the book, they're physical beings. One of them like touches her mask and tries to move it and they stop the boat. So clearly they're physical. They're physical, tangible beings that like in theory you could reach out and touch and you could like feel that they exist. And that's almost less scary to me because it's something that you can touch. It's something that exists, that you could feel it and figure out what it's like, and you can see the drawings that like Gary drew of it and have an idea of what you're facing. But when it's just something in the air that you can't see, that's almost scarier to me. Like the idea of an apocalypse from a disease is scarier to me than zombies, because zombies, you can see them, you know what you're fighting. That right there is the monster. How are you going to fight a disease? If society collapses because of a disease, like how do you fight that? You can't just like swing a sword around and like cut through those disease molecules. Like that's not how it works. And that's so much scarier to me because like you can't fight it. It's just gonna happen. Like unless you find like a cure or whatever, you can't fight it. Versus zombies or the physical manifestation of these creatures in the book, that's something that you can fight. But when it's just in the air and you don't know what you're fighting, that's like you're trying to fight an idea, and you can't physically fight an idea. You can mentally fight it, which is like what they do. They're like mentally struggling back against these creatures, but you can't physically fight it. And the idea of like physically defeating something and like killing it and knowing it is dead and it can't hurt you makes you feel so much more secure than being like, okay, for now I like mentally push them out of my head, like they're gone for now, and like, but will they come back? It just makes me think of like Bring Me the Horizon. Like I can't drown my demons, they know how to swim. Like yeah, you can push them away and like try to drown them, but they'll come back. So if it's not a physical creature, like that's so much scarier to fight. Again, I'm just getting like weirdly deep. Didn't think that would happen from reading Bird Box, like, because I think of Bird Box and I think of this Bird Box challenge and Machine Gun Kelly, and didn't think like the book would make me get this deep, but it really did, and I honestly enjoyed that. Like, sometimes it's nice to just get like existential and like go in and have these like deep, like thought-provoking like questions that you ask yourself, and you're just like thinking about like, wow, like what would I do in this situation? You're just asking yourself all these things about like humans and morality and mortality and like on and on and on. But yeah, I really would recommend Bird Box, especially if you like getting like existential and deep and like questioning your reality and like what you would do in these situations. I really like it for that. But also, even if you just want like a nice read, I enjoyed it for that too, especially if you like apocalyptic stuff. Like, I know like the dystopian genre and shit like that is so played out, and like, but sometimes I just like a little bit of like the world fell apart and we're trying to survive. Like, sometimes it's just like really appealing to me. So if that's like appealing to you too, I think you'll really like Bird Box. Yeah, it was pretty good and fairly short too, so you could probably read it. Like, I read it in one sitting, so it's a nice just like short read, like if you're going on a plane or something. Actually, maybe don't read it on a plane, that might be a little terrifying. But yeah, it's a pretty good read, so I would suggest it and the movie if you are interested in like sci-fi and like apocalyptic stories. And especially, I'm pretty sure too, this is Josh Malerman's first book, and like, it's, I don't know, in my experience sometimes first books with authors are like really hit or miss.
Hit or miss, I guess they never miss, huh?
But this was really good. Like, I genuinely really enjoyed it, and like it kept me interested the whole time. And like, there's so many books that I've forced myself to finish, and this was not one of them, because it just held my attention and I desperately wanted to know what happened in the end. And yeah, I think a lot of people could really enjoy it if you try to read it. Again, if you're like really scared of horror, maybe like don't, but it's not even that like graphic or anything. It's just more like thought-provoking than anything. So this concludes my one night only show of Caitlin being fucking blind with contacts. At least for now. I'll probably wear them in more videos in the future, but like, my version of the Bird Box challenge is done, because I can barely see. I should have blindfolded myself and tried to do this whole video blindfolded, but like, yikes. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.